evening. Good evening. My name is Denise Jorgens. I'm the Director of Programs and External Relations here at International House. I want to welcome you to International House and tonight's program, which is part of the World Beyond the Headlines series here at International House. This is a collaborative project with the University of Chicago Center for International Studies, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and the Seminary Co-op bookstores, with support from the McCormick Tribune Foundation. The program aims to bring scholars and journalists together to consider major international news stories and how these stories are covered. Tonight's program is also part of a week-long series of programs under the banner Displacement Week. And I'd like to just point out to you the next program in this series tomorrow evening, Thursday, February 28th at 6 p.m. There will be a forum on the University of Chicago and its surrounding communities with Susan Campbell of the Office of Community and Government Affairs, as well as other representatives. Tonight's program is with Neera Adarkar. She has been active in the women's movement for 20 years. She is a practicing architect and urban researcher and visiting faculty member in the Academy of Architecture in Mumbai. She is also a founding member of Majlis, a legal and cultural center. She is one of the conveners of the Girgan Bauschau Andolan Save Girgan movement, and she is based in Mumbai. I will let her introduce her topic and then a brief update on the program tonight. We had hoped to have two speakers, but I understand there was an accident involved and the other speaker is not able to join us. So, Neera, welcome.
Thank you, Dennis, and good evening, friends. Yes, this visit was to be a joint visit with my dear friend and my co-author, with whom I have done this book called 100 Years and 100 Voices. That's an oral history of the mill workers of the textile district of Mumbai. Unfortunately, just before her departure, she met with an accident and she broke her left arm. Luckily, there was no other major injury, but this broken arm is going to, she has to undergo the surgery and then she will be perhaps bedridden for a month or so. But and she was very keen on coming here, and in fact, both of us wanted to do it jointly. We are, both of us are involved in the workers' movement, especially in the field of textile industry. Textile industry of Mumbai was the economic backbone of the city, and therefore it is very important. When I show you the images, I can talk a little more about that. I am from Mumbai, Bombay, and I was just telling Samit that I'm born, brought up, and addicted. So I am involved in a couple of urban movements which are happening right now. Our city is undergoing transformation, and our political leaders and bureaucrats and planners and policy makers, we are really dreaming of the transformation, and the model in front of them is sometimes Singapore, sometimes Shanghai, sometimes Dubai. So it, like changes every time. Unfortunately, these we feel that there is no comprehensive, planning or decision-making process which is being followed. And I'm going to talk about three locations in the city which are undergoing very fast transformation and therefore leading to gentrification and displacement. So these three locations, one is of course the textile mill district, and they are in the various stages of transformation. Textile district is already halfway through the transformation, and the gentrification has started, the displacement has also started. The second location is a large slum settlement which is called Dharavi, and that is the largest continuous slums in Asia. And it is becoming internationally known, and for the first time our government has allowed foreign investment in the real estate. And I will talk about that, because that the bids are already floated, and within a couple of months the work can start. But I'll talk about the problems and the lack of planning. And third is ACZ, it is Special Economic Zone, which is not in the city, just outskirts of the city. And they also want to call it Special Entertainment Zone. And it's a cluster of islands, just as I told you, outskirts of the city, and the people are now coming together. It is still in the planning stage, or not even planning stage, it's just a proposal. And it is hopefully the people will build a strong movement against it, and I'll tell you why and so on. So shall we just start with, I'll start with the mill lands, and anytime if you want to ask questions you can just stop me, because I have to cover these things in half an hour, so I'll probably just rush in. I don't want to only focus on the mill lands, although that is my favorite topic. So yeah, next we can. Okay, this is the city of Mumbai, and sorry I have no pointer, and you can show perhaps the city of Mumbai is the island city. What you see in yellow there is the island city, which was the mainly seat of colonial power, and then the suburbs started expanding. These were next. City was actually 7 islands, and why I want to tell you that is that this, what you see, the the marshy land or the sea in between was ultimately reclaimed, and this reclamation has happened of course by the government, the colonial government, but the reclamation is also happened by people. So people have themselves reclaimed the land, and so most of the poor settlements, the slum settlements, are on this land which are reclaimed by the people, and otherwise the land which is reclaimed by the government, you have a lot of formal housing. Next. This is just a glimpse of the the city which has the colonial monuments. Next. And then of course it goes through the phase of Art Deco and so on. Next. Then this is where the area which is more for the trading community which migrated from different parts of India, not different, actually from Gujarat and Rajasthan, the trading community migrated. This city was not livable, marshy land, a lot of mosquitoes and so on. So finally the government had to, when the government decided to make it into a port, the British government, and then the industrial city, they actually invited people from Gujarat and the labor from the hinterland to come and start the industry. Next. Yeah, so this is I just gave you a glimpse of the built environment to see how it starts from colonial to working class areas. Next. And of course this is what is happening today, that which was a port now is recasting itself as a global metropolis, and somehow the idea of global city, the first class city, whatever, it is only limited to these kind of the built forms in steel and glass. Next. Yes, and somewhere it is assumed that deindustrialization is a prerequisite for to enter the era of globalization. Next. So this was, as I told you, it was an important port, and then cotton trade, and then it became a manufacturing sector. Next. 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 Yes, this is how the area looked about, say, 5 years ago. And as I told you, the textile industry was the economic backbone of the city. I mean, the entire, whatever the industries which came after the textile industry were basically the investment came from the textile industry. So most of the textile mill owners, whatever profit they got from the textile industry, then they started pharmaceutical engineering and so on. And that's why we say that this is the backbone. Next. And this is how the same area looks, and the skyline is changing very fast. What you see in the foreground are working class housing. We've already heard that there is an American investor who's real estate developer who's interested in developing this entire area, and this has become now a very prime location. Next. Next. This is the, what you see here are the mills. What is special about the textile industry is that these mills, there were 70 mills now, till recently there were 58 mills, but they are in close proximity. So that's why it becomes a district. Next. And there were about 250,000 workers in 1980, and then you can multiply the number of, the family members and so on. Next. Next. This is just to show that it is not the area doesn't become important because of the mills only. There are other lands, and as you can see, it's really the heart of the city. Next. This is the Easter waterfront, which you see in yellow. That is again another area which is eyed by the developers. Somehow it is still protected by the federal government, but soon I think that will be open for the land grab. Next. Next. Because the city is linear and because it is in the heart, the textile industry, it has got excellent infrastructure. The infrastructure was, again, it came up because the neighborhood evolved, and the neighborhood which consisted of the mill workers. Next. So there are important railway lines and important roads which are passing through this area. Next. Yeah, so we always feel that this offers a window to the political, economic and social history of the Mumbai city, because we feel that it is actually the textile industry, the evolution of the neighborhood, the evolution of various cultural and social institutions has given the identity to Mumbai. Next. So this is that area enlarged, and this is only to show you the rich infrastructure. The purple areas are all the mills. Then there are, it's surrounded by all the residences of the textile workers, and then the infrastructure, and you can see lots of green areas, very high density housing. If you see the housing, they are very congested, but they are always around some open space or the other. And then there are various social institutions which are mapped here. I am not going into those details now. Next. This is a glimpse of how the textile mills, the industrial architecture looked. Next. 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 And there is a heritage movement in our city, and there are quite a few heritage monuments which are protected. Unfortunately, this industrial architecture was never part of the list. It's only because of our insistence that the list includes these mills. But unfortunately, before the legislation came, it was very easy for the mill owners and the developers who had already purchased the mills to demolish most of what you've seen. Next. Next. Yeah, so as I said, it evolved social institutions, they fought great political battles, they entertained and educated the city with their plays, music, verse, and then influenced the economy, politics and culture of the city. Next. So what is important is 2/3 of city's labor was employed in the textile industry, and that's why its importance again. Next. Next. These are the working class, housing. sometimes built by the private landowners, sometimes by the mill owners, because mill owners wanted the labor, and they wanted the labor from the surrounding towns and villages to come, and therefore the mill owners said that fine, we will build housing for you, but please come and work for us. Next. And you can see the, it's a very vibrant area, it's a very vibrant community, and as I said, there are many social, cultural institutions, there are troops, theatre troops, performing artists. Next. 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 These were, it was interesting, this one institution, which is economic institution as well as social, because there were so many migrants, and migrants were single migrants, they didn't bring their families initially. So then some families which were already settled, these women started private dining spaces for them. And they were not just private dining spaces, but they became a place for cultural and social interaction as well. So there would be mill workers who would come to this house to eat, and and then they would talk about their villages, then they would have their own village groups emerging from there. Next. It is a very important textile, next. Textile union is a very important, and during that time, during 1930s to 60s, 70s, it was kind of a showcase for the international communist movement, because the communist trade union here was extremely strong, and it kind of became an example for many other industrial unions. And here you will see that there are quite a few women participating. It is, and I personally think it's mainly because the proximity of the place of work and the place of residence. So it was very convenient for women to be not only part of the wage labor market, but also part of all the militant struggles which happened, whether the militant struggles were for their pay, for the working hours, for maternity benefits, even freedom struggle. During the freedom struggle, there was a large contingent of women textile workers who participated, and then there was again a linguistic struggle for the formation of our state of Maharashtra. Next. Next. As I said, they were because this was a communist trade union, it had international links, and here you see the bard, the prominent singers of this area with Pablo Neruda. So it was, as I said, the networking was excellent. Next. Next. So it was in 80s that the industry started declining, and because, as I said, the profits were diversified into other industries, and then there was real estate. The mill owners realized that there was so much profit in selling up the land and redeveloping it. But because these lands were leased out to these owners, there was no change of user allowed. So as per the legislation of the city, the city has development plans, and then this area was protected in two ways: that you cannot change the user, it has to be a textile industry, and secondly the FAR, that is the built up, what FAR is a term used here? Okay, so what is the allowable built up area? If you have a plot, how much do you build? So if the FAR is 1, which means floor area ratio, if FAR is 1, then if you have 100 square feet, then you can only build 100 square feet building. Whether you build it in 10 story or 1 story, it doesn't matter, as long as you keep enough open space. So that FAR was restricted only to 0.5. But it so happened that the mill owners put pressure on the government, saying that we don't want to run the mills are a burden on us, so give us the permission to develop. Next. And they started closing down the mills. So this I've already talked about. So they demanded a change in development control regulation. So for the first time in 1991, the government allowed the mill owners to develop the mill land. But at the same time, there was the textile workers were very strong, and then the loss of livelihood, at least at that time, was anticipated, and the government put some restrictions. Next. So under that change of rule, the closure of mills were allowed. But and the change of user from industrial to commercial residential were also allowed. The floor space index was increased. So the mill owners got the benefit, but they had to, in return, they had to share some land with the city, which means the government and some of the well-known architects like Charles Correa were part of that committee, and it was decided that 1/3 of the land would be given to the mill owners, 1/3 would be for the open spaces which are required the city, and 1/3 would go for public housing. So 1/3 for public housing, 1/3 for public open space, and 1/3 for the mill owner. But the mill owner was not a loser, because he was getting the development rights of the public areas. Only thing is his space was 1/3, but he could build as if he would have built on the entire site. Next. So this was the division: 1/3 for the owner, city amenities, and public housing. And I forgot to mention, but the total area of the mills is about 600 acres or about 280 hectares. Next. We as part of, and this is the time when I entered the picture, because some of our friends who were in the trade union movement, and they came to us saying that you are architects, so please help us, because we don't understand these divisions and we don't want the mills to close down. And then we had series of meetings with the workers, and we realized that what the government has missed out was on the alternative means of livelihood. In the sense, the mill owner was allowed to develop residential, commercial, but what happens to the mill owners? Because they are skilled industrial workers, they are not white collar workers, it was not possible for them to get jobs there. So we had, on behalf of the workers, we submitted another alternative plan, saying that whatever the mill owners share, at least 30%, 50%, whatever you decide, has to be reserved for a manufacturing industry. It could be low polluting, high tech, whatever it is, but the next generation of the workers at least should have access to manufacturing livelihood. And from the public housing quota, 50% of the housing should be reserved for the textile workers. In the sense, it was not free housing, but the land would be given to them, they would build, or the government would build, and the workers would pay the cost. Next. Somehow the mill owners did not accept this, and for a long time they kept on pressurizing the government to make a modification, because they were not happy that they had to share their land. And by then the real estate industry was so lucrative in the city, and the island city, as you see, it's a linear city, and South Bombay is the most commercial and rich area. This is immediately working class area, which was always looked down upon for almost a century, suddenly becomes very important. And the mill owners put pressure on the government to say that no, you please change this, we cannot share the land with the public. Next. And government did a trick. I don't know how many of you will understand, because it's what the government. Okay, instead of going to that, let me just tell you that in a very clever manner, the government changed the rule in such a way that the mill owner share became so much, and you can see the public housing and public open space share is reduced drastically. Next. So if you see actually the mill, say for example this is Piramal mill, and you see what open space would have been, and what Mada is public housing, and green is public amenities, and suddenly with the change of rule it reduces so much. Just telling you in one sentence, how does it happen? It is the earlier rule said 1/3 of the entire land. The modification in 2001 says, just adds one line, you see that bottom line there, that division of spaces before demolition, which means the land is occupied by the structures. So you deduct those structures, and only the strips of open spaces you divide into 3 parts. So that was the trick, and it doesn't mean that the structures won't be demolished. The structures would be demolished, but the open space calculation would be as if the structures were not demolished. And it was such a clever move that I have to admit that it took some time to actually realize the trick. So it's the mill workers, and that's the time we realized that the nexus is not only of the politicians and the mill owners and the real estate, but the bureaucrats were also using their acumen to make changes in the legislation. Next. Next, this is another example. Next. So overall what you see here, if the green spaces and the brown spaces would have been like this if the earlier rule was to be implemented, but next, but now it is like this. You can see just the specks of green and this. Next. So now most of these mills are demolished and there are open spaces like this, and the new structures which are coming up you can see. Next. So this is how the new, suddenly this is now getting gentrified, and you have, this is a 5-star hotel which is coming up there. This is mill getting demolished. Next. So what happens to the mill workers? The mill workers have lost their jobs, and then now they are, so it's displacement from livelihood, and now it's displacement from the neighborhood as well. And then from the formal sector, this was a, as I told you, this jobs of, I mean it was in the formal sector, but now they have to go into informal sector and they become vegetable vendors, or you know, this person who was a skilled worker has to do some kind of a home-based economic activity. Next. So the hopes to revive cities' open space was demolished. Then the land which was to become available for affordable housing was given back to the mill owners, while 60% of Mumbai's population continues to live in slums. So this area would have been extremely important for formal housing. And change of land uses from industrial to commercial means loss of jobs. Next. Now there was a very strong struggle put up by not only the mill workers but the city as a whole. And for the first time, the city's groups, which are environmental groups, non-government organizations, housing activists, and the working class people came together. It had not happened earlier. I must tell you, the scenario in Mumbai is the environmentalists are mainly the activists, you know, who talk about clean Mumbai, you know, clean, beautiful, and so on. But they cannot juxtapose that with, say, supposing an open space is occupied by a slum settlement. So then there is, they don't have sympathy with the slum settlement, or they don't talk about alternative housing. They just say that you have to evict because they are quote unquote illegal encroachers and so on. So it was, but for the first time, because the mill land issue was not only limited to the mill workers' jobs, but also to public spaces and housing, it was that we managed to get people across the board on one platform. And there was a public interest litigation filed in the court. And we formed Mumbai People's Action Committee, where all these people, and I must say, ultimately, you know, overall, if you see, perhaps it's a lost battle, but at least what we managed to do was we made people see each other's point of views. So no more now environmentalists just say that, oh, you just, you know, erase the slums. We don't want to see the slums in the city. We don't want them. You know, they are going beyond that and talking about demands of alternative housing as well. Similarly, the mill workers also have realized that the open spaces are equally important and not only their jobs. So in a way, there was a good interaction during that time. Next, then we, you can see from the paper cuttings how this media also supported a lot during that time. Next. And the High Court gave which is based in the city, gave a very, I mean, it was a historical judgment. The High Court said, city requires open spaces, the city requires public housing, so we do not accept the change of rule by the government, and that this rule should be again back to the proper 1/3. But the mill owners and the government went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, that is the apex court, the federal court, and that supported the government just on this issue whether the government has a right to change the rule or not. The Supreme Court did not go into the depth of the issue, but it just was a very technical decision, which means now the city was, you know, given totally to the mill owners and the textile, the real estate developers. So we feel that it is kind of, it marks the, you know, it became a precedent for the real estate boom in the city, and somewhere it was kind of realized by the real estate developers that they can, you know, they can just get whatever they want. Next. So as I said, it became a precedent for the city's future, and in the guise of pro-private sector reform, the real estate industry as a whole was increasingly given a free hand in Mumbai's land development. Next. And this is how in transition, you see the chimney there, the smoke stacks, but there are the fancy stores which are coming up there, and not an inch that has gone into any substantial productive employment. It's mainly retail and upper end housing. Next. As the mills are being pulled down, they are not being replaced by modest housing, but very niche kind of thing for the the new service sector people, who are part of the global financial market. Next. Next. So we feel that certainly there is some kind of formula of gentrification. There is a lot of redevelopment. Then there is insecurity amongst the people, because there is a glaring difference between the new built forms and the existing neighborhood environment. And the people, on one hand, they have hopes. They think that they are also getting upgraded. On the other hand, there is insecurity because they don't know whether they will be, they will continue to live there. The government has a legislation saying that the developer has to provide housing for the existing tenants or the existing people. But as you can guess, that once the price starts increasing, it is the pressure on the people to sell and go away is very strong, because with no jobs there, just keeping a house in a prime location does not work. Next. This is how the area looks now. Next. 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 Yes, so now the fight is for the last battle which is remaining, which we are fighting right now, is whatever little open space which is to come to the city and which is to come for workers' housing, that is also not being handed over by the developers. And the government is not showing political will to get it from the people, and therefore the workers again have to come on the street to demand whatever is legitimate share of theirs. You can see that only 2 out of 24 mills have actually surrendered the land which was supposed to be surrendered. Next. Yeah, so this is these are the issues which are thrown up, that how much of the history and heritage do we keep and how much is obsolete, what constitutes the imagination of urban India and what constitutes Vision Mumbai. Vision Mumbai is a term used by our government very often, as I told you, and their vision changes from one city to the other. Yeah, I think we will go to the next. Now I'll really go very fast. This was, as I told you, a formal sector, legal employment, legal housing, and these polarities of legal, illegal, formal, informal have to be contested. But I'm just very broadly saying that we are talking about another area which is informal, which is which supposed to be encroached upon. These are all very informal slum housing, but because now it happens to be very next to most expensive financial sector, this Dharavi area, Dharavi slum, has got a lot of importance. And as you saw, the mill lands are already under development, and here the plan is just being floated and the bids are being floated. In spite of the fact that this is supposed to be illegal and informal, the fate for the mill district, the residents of the mill district neighborhood and for this is the same, because their needs are not addressed in the new plan. Their needs of livelihood, their needs of housing are not addressed. Dharavi is a special case where you see a lot of manufacturing, informal manufacturing, home-based manufacturing happens in the households as well. So when you are thinking of replanning, redeveloping, it's very important that you don't think only as housing, but you have to think of their other activities as well, because 80% of people in Dharavi actually work in Dharavi, and their livelihood depends on that, and they are all migrants coming from different parts of the city. Next. So here if you see the map, you see the mill lands, say about 5 to 7 kilometers away is Dharavi, and 500 meters from Dharavi is the Bandra Kurla complex, which is the the prime financial district. And what you don't see at the left hand corner above, yeah, that is the new ACZ which is coming there, which is, there are some islands away from the coast. Yeah, next. This is how it looks today, Dharavi slums. As I told you, this is Asia's largest slum. Next. And but just 500 meters away is this. This is the Bandra Kurla complex. Next. And the lower portion you see is Dharavi, and that is a totally marshy land which was reclaimed by the people as they came from different parts of the country, and this is only 50 years old, not like textile industry which has a much longer history. And beyond the creek, in upper portion you see the marshy land still exists, and beyond that is the Bandra Kurla complex, the financial district. Next. Next. Yeah, it has a very multicultural character. Unlike the mill area, people from potters came from one part, then there were leather tanning industries, one of the major industries of Dharavi. Lot of leather goods you see in New York or in Chicago also probably are exported from that area, and they are made in the small settlements. Embroidery workers, then different. Okay, next. Basically, just to tell you next. Next. Yeah, so if you see from here on the left hand side, you see the total population, 12 million population of Mumbai, 54% live in slums. But they occupy, on the right hand side if you see, they occupy only 6% of the area. So 54% live on 6% of area. Next. And then this is what you see is Dharavi area. On the right hand side you will see in terms of the area. Next. Yeah. Next. Next. Yeah, so there were various legislations. I can only tell you just one important legislation. There was a time when our Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi had visited in 1987, I think, and that is the time he realized that the federal government needs to do something. So he gave funds to the Maharashtra government, the local government, to improve the conditions. And then the people, it was really a policy whereby people could participate. In the sense, the people had to come together, collect some minimum amount, then go to the government. Government would act as catalyst and get the consultants or loan, and that's how the walkable apartments were built. So there was no developer involved there. The people contributed and later also repaid the loan. But there was this new right-wing government which came. They suddenly announced a free housing policy. And once any government announces a free housing policy, it's very difficult for any of the government to take it back. So the free housing policy, which means the slum settlements would be given to the developer. The developer builds, gives free housing to the residents, but he gets the land rights, and the land rights are multiplied so it becomes a great incentive for the developer to build. So I personally feel that this free housing scheme doesn't work so much, because what the developer gets to sell is much more, and the developer will only choose the areas which are more lucrative in the market. Next. Next. Yeah, next. So now the policy is that you have to give 225 square feet per house, and then the developer can sell the remaining as high-end housing in the market. Next. If this is the existing land use, and you see that lot of industrial areas, the yellow are the residential areas and the magenta color is the industry. Next. These are again not big, not like mills. You won't even recognize that they are industries, because they are done in the household, or say potters who came from Gujarat have a settlement where they have a large open space in between, and then they have the women and men come together, work together, and then the pots are sold outside. So it is that kind of very urban, but yet operating at a very small scale household level. So 80% of the people working in Dharavi live in Dharavi, and therefore whenever you address it, you have to address this issue of not just giving 225 square feet for housing, but what will happen to their actually economic activity. Where is the space? And if they are to be provided space in a tower, then this does not work. So, and if you give more, the government has said that this is now part of urban renewal scheme, so the FAR is increased fourfolds, which means you can build 4 times the site area. If you build 4 times the site area, which means you have to go vertical, and if you have to go vertical, then the existing system of the neighborhood, economic as well as social cultural, will not work. Next. So there are textile, pottery, leather, printing presses, and this is one of the largest recycling activities happen in Dharavi. Of course it is unhygienic, of course the environmental, there are environmental hazards, but this can be taken care of. Unfortunately, what is given to the choice for the people is, okay, you live like this in bad condition, or then give it to the developer and and then it can be just high-rise development. So there is no other choice which is say in between. Next. So in terms of infrastructure, it is very unlike the mill land, which is extremely rich in the infrastructure in terms of educational institute, hospitals, transport, everything. And this is very, as you can see, it's 10 times, 15 times less than the normal. Next. Yeah, so it is unhygienic living conditions, poor housing, high density, low lying area, lack of social amenities. Next. But the existing density is very high. And what now? Next, let's go to the ground. Yeah, next. Okay, just go to the previous slide. Yeah, if you see here, the population is per different census things. And what today the government has assumed is the third column, and they have assumed that the households are 57,000. Let's assume 60,000. But we have formed a group of professionals and experts and ex-bureaucrats and continuously lobbying with the government, and we have told them that, look, you cannot go ahead with redevelopment unless there is a basic socio-economic survey done, basic survey of what the people need, and thirdly, what is going to be the density. Now it has come out, the government did agree with us, and finally just one demand they agreed to make to conduct a socio-economic survey, and the result of the socio-economic survey, which actually is continuing now, is that instead of 60,000 households, there are 90,000 households as of now, because they calculate only the number of structure, they did not calculate how many families were living within the structure. Next. So the possibilities here is, that it can be an integrated development if the government really considers needs of all the stakeholders. It's a prime location, very close to Bandra Kurla complex. It has a excellent connectivity and it has interdependence of industries. Next. Now just go ahead, we will not go into this. This is one academic institution which came up with some alternatives. Next. Yes. Now this is what is proposed by the government. Unfortunately, the only plan the government has is this, where the entire area is divided into 10 sectors. Unfortunately, these divisions don't even match the existing settlements. But these 10 sectors would be given to 10 developers. And each sector, and it is up to the developer to rehabilitate the people, it is up to the developer to provide infrastructure, it is up to the developer to decide the density, and it's up to the developer to decide the norms for the infrastructure. Whereas our demand is that the state government should decide the guidelines for the developer. It cannot be left to the government, to the private developer to develop the way they want to. And especially if the foreign real estate developers are going to come here, they are not going to be familiar with the complexities of these areas. And it is very important that government decides how much open space, how many roads, how many schools, how many hospitals, and then probably the built form could be decided by the developer. Next. Next. So what the media projects, the government has now become very market savvy, very, their public relation is improving a lot. So what you see here are some images taken from somewhere in the world or from the net, and so they are showing that, look, Dharavi, what you see at the bottom with all those shanties, are going to be transformed into upper elevated walkways, big shopping malls and things like that. So we are termed as activists, and today activist has become a phrase which means that you are very negative, you are anti-development, you don't want anything good to happen. So if this good is to happen, then you have to support the government. And then on the right there is a list of people the media has published who have visited the Dharavi recently. It includes Madonna and Prince Charles and UN people and whatnot, so that list is also given there. Next. Yeah, I think we will stop here. This is just gave you a background of two areas which are getting transformed. This, as I told you, the bids are just floated. Out of 19, there will be 10 developers who will be selected. And the conditions were so stringent that it was very difficult for the Indian developer to, take part on his own. So most of them have collaborated with some foreign developers or the other. The third part, I don't have any presentation, but just I was talking about this special economic zone, which is not even in the planning stage, which is just a proposal mooted by the owner of a big entertainment complex which happens near that island, to have a big entertainment zone around that area, which is a cluster of small settlements, fisher folks, mainly Catholics, and they are not poor at all. They have not lost their jobs. The fishing activity is quite lucrative. They have their own trawlers, they have their own boats, and this is suddenly the owner of this entertainment complex has convinced the government that, okay, let's be partners, and we have a big entertainment zone with large water parks and you know what all. And this is when now the people are suddenly realizing that this is the onslaught, and they have come together. Why I mentioned most of them are Catholics, that the church is playing a very important and positive role here, mobilizing the people against this proposal. And the last week's news is that I visited there, and I realized the people are very, very upset that all these kind of things are done without their knowledge. There is no transparency, and they had a massive march of 10,000 people. And finally the owner had to accept that. He said, well, I am withdrawing right now, but I have hopes that I will convince all of you how beneficial this economic zone is going to be for you guys. So the things rested that. I think I'll stop here. Probably we can open.